Lucky. I would say when someone says the word cult film, I think lucky. You may experience some fortune when you make a tentpole picture and it is successful. But it's expected because the numbers tell you so.
I like to think of it like a movie that everybody else missed. You're always hoping that it's going to reach as many people as possible, but for one reason or another, a lot of time these movies kind of go under the radar, but then over time, people just, like every good movie finds a way.
It could be any type of film. I don't necessarily think of sci-fi or horror. It could be comedy, it could be romance, it could be a musical, it could be any type of film, but one that has found a following over a period of time.
It's film for people on the fringes of society. I think it's film for people who don't see themselves in, you know, the Marvel movies, or who don't see themselves in The Hunger Games or Harry Potter.
It could be good, it could be bad. If you loved it, you know, and then a whole other group of people loved it, they all kind of just joined together and people just loved that movie.
The first thing I think of is like the island of misfit toys.
Anything with that disreputable lack of gloss.
People really on fire, real explosions.
Most people can say they like Jaws. Most people aren't gonna tell you that they like The Sentinel or 10 to Midnight.
Normal people don't want to see it.
Cult movies, highly offensive.
Hollywood movies can get very cookie cutter. And the cult movies, the exploitation movies, the ones that didn't have the same kind of financial investment, those are the ones that can really surprise you.
I think we've had cult films since the beginning, and we've had lots of weird films since the beginning. I mean, Cabinet of Dr. Caligari is fucking freaky as hell. Un Chien Andalou.
I mean, there were cult films in the 50s, in the 40s, in the 30s. There were, I mean, but the 70s, there was something in the ether called competition. There was something in the ether where the the playing field was slightly sloped to help the big devil-worshipping independent media conglomerates. But we had a chance. We had a chance. If we had something that was entertaining, we could get it into 1,000 movie theaters or 2,000 screens. We could do it easy.
There were always independent filmmakers since the beginning of cinema. But this was the first time massive numbers of filmmakers could make their own movies and try to get them distributed, made, financed, cast, written themselves. They could do it all at once. It was the first time filmmakers had the ability to make movies on their own, full-length features, without the help of the major studios in great numbers. The studios were breaking down, and they were dismantled by the government, number one, which hurt them. But two, the studio bosses like Jack Warner no longer knew, as Warner had 30, 40, 50 years ago, what people really wanted to see.
The big studio blockbusters like Cleopatra and stuff had pretty much, you know, run their course, and you had movies like Easy Rider that coming out, and so you had studios and film backers backing these smaller independent films.
That collided head on with the counterculture, and specifically a counterculture that in 1968, 69 into the 70s was kind of turning, and the people that were still in it, I think, you know, when you look at that history, were having a lot of negative things going on in their world. You know, they were getting into drugs and, you know, harder drugs, and, you know, the political momentum that they had all staked a lot of their lives on had failed in a lot of ways.
You know, their heads were very much in this sort of space of paranoia, and, you know, the sort of like collapse of what the sort of picturesque, like Norman Rockwell-esque life had been the decade prior to that.
And so you saw a lot of these people turn to film as a way to channel that frustration and that anger.
From a filmmaker's standpoint, it becomes an economic consideration. We have to go balls to the wall because otherwise we can't compete. So you have these filmmakers from that era trying to make movies that are going to stand out because they can't stand out in other ways.
Because studios weren't as restricting, you get really interesting stuff coming out. Like Werewolves on Wheels.
Werewolves on Wheels, the most eerie, the most chilling, the most terrifying motorcycle horror film ever made.
I think this is dealing with cult films starting in the 70s, but remember the people that saw the films in the 50s and 60s were the one that made the films in the 70s. So it's a lot of those films that were made at those times that it became the cult films later.
I started making my first films in the early 1970s, and a couple of them have been talked about as cult films. But certainly when I was making them, I had no intention whatever that I was making a cult film. I was always trying to make a film that would be successful enough that I could make another film.
I think a lot of producers didn't really know what they were making, and the filmmakers got off and did what they want.
And just by the sheer law of averages, as there are more pictures, there's going to be more great movies. And a lot more shit.
Her friends called him Honky.
Delinquent schoolgirls.
Keep running till you find out what kind of black girl you really are.
Teenage mother means 9 months of trouble.
If you had something interesting, the theaters would play it because the theaters weren't owned and controlled by 2 or 3 giant chains.
There are these, you know, great, huge movie theaters that are around since the Depression, and people came in and started playing. You know, that's where you'd see the black exploitation, the biker films, you know, and films like that. And it was also this place where you pay an admission, and they never gave a fuck how long you were there for. You got to stay there as long as you want.
He made me do it!
Bitch, are you for real?
But the interesting thing is a lot of people would actually sleep there, and there's a movie called Shakedown with Peter Weller and Sam Elliott. And if you watch the opening of that film, Sam Elliott is living in a grindhouse theater. He's watching The Soldier, and then he wakes up, he goes into the bathroom, and he's got his toothbrush there inside a fuse box. And I think that's I think that's the closest thing you can see to a grindhouse in a way.
I remember 42nd Street when it was still the 42nd Street of grindhouse and bad B movies. Mostly 42nd Street I remember as the worst kind of porn advertising I've ever seen.
That area had always been known for debauchery and for lewdness and for looser moralities, and that's why it was able to flourish there so intensely. You know, we see stuff like in Taxi Driver when he takes her on a date down to those theaters to watch the porno. You know, we see that, you know, that was the area where people who didn't want to go see Cary Grant in another movie would go to catch their films. You know, we saw that was where people went to see something different.
The main way that these early cult films became classics was midnight screenings. You know, it was theater owners going, no one's coming to see a movie at midnight. How can we market like these strange films? I think El Topo is kind of designated as the first one that became a success in midnight screening. Eraserhead is another one, Pink Flamingos.
Night of the Living Dead was It played midnights, I think, throughout the 70s. Like, it was always around. Even when I was a kid, Night of the Living Dead was always talked about. You know, way even after Dawn of the Dead, Night of the Living Dead just was always there. And people going to see it every single night it played. People started like doing drugs and just bringing their friends to show them, and then they needed to bring more friends to show them these films.
The smoke smelled funky in those rooms.
It's nothing dangerous. You would like it. It's very relaxing, you know.
You could smell a cloud of that stuff, and there'd always be the sound of a ting, 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 which would be the rolling beer bottle down the aisle of the movie theater. So most cult films were enjoyed in kind of an altered state, which I think makes a lot of sense.
Over time, these films wouldn't play in, you know, in the classic theaters, but when they played in these midnight circuits, it just started attracting this weird crowd of people and word of mouth.
I think it's definitely a legendary, you know, era of film, and like so many of the things that are looked upon as cult classics, like, came through that.
I think the reason that the 70s are known as the birth of cult cinema is those movies have endured. Movies from that period that became cult films, we're still talking about them. They still have left an indelible mark. They still have like a huge impact. And it's part of cult film history.
Everybody was allowed to make the movie they wanted. And for better or worse, that I think helped launch all of the great movies that we had in the 80s.
There is only one master, and his name is Satan.
Planning on going somewhere. Would you like to go with me?
Police business? Like that few words.
Zombies, exploding heads, creepy crawlies. We could have a little problem.
That's what I love about cult cinema, is there's so many subgenres in the same way that horror has subgenres. For me, a big deal to me was when I went to Kim's Underground in New York City for the first time, which, you know, RIP, used to be on St. Mark's Place. I think it's a Target now, which figures. But I used to go there all the time. It was the first video store. It was music, videos for buy, and videos for rent. And it was the first video store where things were separated into nunsploitation, or Italian giallo, or polizia tecce, like all these weird subgenres. And I'm like, what the hell is nunsploitation?
And what form does this incubus take?
Slasher films, you know, blaxploitation, kung fu movies. Oh man.
Honor, disgrace, vengeance.
Rape and Revenge, Women Who Kill, those are always my favorite. I do like women in prison movies because, you know, they have to turn into lesbians every time.
Rules and new inmates are meant to be broken.
Prison virgin? Well, after the shock rubs off, you'll get the picture.
There's cult, and then at the very end, there's that little rack that's smut. And there's a very thin line between smut and cult, let me tell you.
For cult films in general, I think that's when the lines started getting blurred, because you had a cult section and you'd find the same cult movies on that shelf, Eraserhead and, you know, Repo Man, like all the classics. But then it just became this shelf where the video store owner or the employees, whatever was a weird movie they couldn't place on the shelf, they just fucking throw on that cult movie shelf. You know, so all of a sudden, if a movie was just weird and strange, even though if it wasn't a cult film, it would just automatically go on that shelf for some reason.
Video stores changed everything. Video stores changed everything. When they became prominent in the 80s, you know, something you went to as frequently as the grocery store, video stores were everything.
When we went to the movies, it was an event, but you know, you could go to the video store 2 or 3 times a week. But I would say early 80s, mid 80s for me. So a lot of the movies that I've seen, I'd say about 70% of the movies I saw during my childhood came from VHS. It probably has as much impact on how I view movies now as any other intake that I've used.
You see all the art stacked up against each other, and it just becomes this beautiful collage of blacks and reds and, you know, deep, vivid colors. You know, they're offset from each other. It's just like, oh my God. And that's how we used to pick out movies. I would not read the back of the box. I would just go from the cover art.
It was like this tangible thing, right? It could be copied, it could be shared. It introduced cover art to the masses, you know what I mean? I'm sure like people love to talk about the way that cover art really sucked them in a video store, you know? I think everybody's got that. Everybody who's into this kind of thing has that one movie that sat on the shelves kind of just luring them in for years. Maybe they didn't rent it. Like I know a lot of people who just had those and, oh, I never watched it, but I would sit there and stare at the cover art forever.
Ghoulies, like I think everybody remembers the little gremlin guy popping out of the toilet.
Where like the remake of The Blob, that always is a cool one where it has the guy like reaching out and he's like back there and it's just gnarly. That movie's, I still love that movie.
The Driller Killer video cover, the porno box edition version.
I really love the box art for The Hunger, actually. The original one, like the double-size box that where you open it up and it has like padding around it because your VHS, you know, can't hit the ground or it'll smash into a million pieces.
Vasectomy, the movie, a delicate matter. Now, Vasectomy, the movie, which is, what is this?
I think the cover of Gator Bait got me to go through puberty.
Deathstalker was one, you know, because I remember renting it and watching it and just being totally like, what the fuck? Where are those 2 gargoyles with the mace on the front cover? Where was that battle? You know, it was gone. Same thing with like Warrior of the Lost World. Has like the sickest fucking VHS cover with a guy on a motorcycle shooting missiles. And then when you rent it, it was just so low rent and so disappointing. I think that was the time of just seeing these amazing artwork and renting it and just being like, what is this?
You know, anything that even sounded marginally interesting, you just grab it. You know what I mean? Oh, this has a monster, this has a half-naked girl. I'll just take this, and it doesn't matter. You know, like, even if I don't watch it, it costs me $1.
So because cult films don't make a huge profit at the box office, VHS tend to be where they make their money back. I think that's the obvious benefit for filmmakers. That, of course, getting their films seen more than they could have been. I mean, I still watch films on VHS. I still watch a lot of cult films on VHS, and it's obviously beneficial in that way to the filmmakers. I think for film viewers, it gave them another opportunity to connect with these.
Having direct-to-video be a thing, having direct-to-video be a profitable path for certain types of movies led to, you know, explosions of independent films, horror films, and even cult films finding a life, right? I mean, like, you know, I could finally see Eraserhead at a time other than midnight. You know, we've moved through all these platforms, right? There's, you know, there's cable, there's VHS, there's Laserdisc.
Is all this exciting programming available now? Really? Super concerts by top entertainers? Blockbuster films, both current and vintage? Cooking lessons, documentaries, how to do a tennis, golf, swimming, and crafts? Cartoons, the arts, NFL football, interactive discs? All of them and more. And far less expensive than pre-recorded videotape.
Laserdisc looked awesome. It was killer back in the day, but it was, I mean, it's like collecting vinyl. The things were massive. You know, the Laserdiscs were huge. And I had the Pioneer player that had the A/B, like it would, like, because you had to flip the Laserdisc, because it was, you know, couldn't hold all the content. But I had the one that you could actually, like, it would stop for a second and then you'd hear a little noise and it would flip the laser to the other side, I guess. I don't know how it worked, but that's what it was.
I knew a guy who bought, I think he bought almost $25,000 worth of Laserdiscs. Because remember, they're like $100 a piece. 250 discs, it's not that much. Now it's nothing. But then that was like a lot of money. And then like whatever, the 3 years later, you couldn't play any of them.
Another bright idea from Magnavox.
There was another thing that also really helped get people to see cult films at the time, which was also the advent of cable television. Because when cable television first started, USA Network didn't have, 80 hours of Burn Notice to play. They were just like, oh, well, let's get the Trauma catalog and show Toxic Avenger.
The first superhero born out of nuclear waste.
You suddenly had all these avenues for content, in need of content, and cheap content. And so movies that, didn't do well, that were essentially cult, became almost mainstays in home entertainment. Nobody would have saw The Thing if it wasn't for HBO. If we didn't have, if HBO didn't get, Big Trouble in Little China for cheap, nobody would have seen it because it just came and went in the theaters. Nobody remembers it. Nobody would have remembered it.
They would show them like 12 to, like you would see The Creature, some off-the-wall knockoff of an alien movie, and they would show that on Showtime because they would have filler. It would basically be filler TV. They made their money during prime time and during the afternoons and boxing and everything else. So yeah, there's a lot of the offshoot movies that I probably would have never seen if it hadn't been for 24-hour cable networks like Showtime and HBO and then Cinemax and on and on.
It was Beastmaster, Dragon Slayer, and Ice Pirates. They were always on. And because they were always on, in my mind, those were huge movies. Those were like Star Wars big. Like everyone has seen these movies. And there was that running joke with HBO that it was, hey, Beastmaster's on, because they played it so much.
Friday, travel back in time to the age of darkness, to a land of mystical heroes and murderous villains, where one warrior leads the creatures of the wild in a battle against the forces of evil, the Beastmaster.
And that's the thing, like today, like a movie like Teen Witch is a cult film. It's because it was on every fucking day. And there was not many channels. And so you were forced to watch fucking Teen Witch every day. And you're watching it because you also know that horrible rap scene is coming up.
I'm king, and they know it. When I snap my fingers, everybody says sure, I'm hot, and you're not. But if you want to hang with me, I'll give it one shot, top that.
It's like I didn't want to watch BMX Bandits 50 fucking times in my life, but I had no choice because it was always fucking on cable.
You'd look in the TV guide or whatever, and you'd find out when things were playing, and then you'd watch it, or you'd just randomly put on, just flip through and look for something crazy, and then you'd find like the last 10 minutes of a movie, and you'd watch it, and then it was like the best movie ever, and then you go back and watch the first 80 minutes, and it sucked,
Oh, it was awesome because after 11 o'clock, it was a tour of trash. Like, that's where I saw The Sword and the Sorceress and the movies with the Barbarian twins in it. And even, like the knockoff, Sergio Leone movies, Cinemax, they would just play it. Maybe they'd throw a Friday the 13th movie in there. But it seemed so weak sauce after you just saw a guy with a tomahawk run another guy down, or, a bunch of cowboys take another cowboy and gouge his eyes out in a cave.
I remember one memory was Heavy Metal, the cartoon. And I remember as a young kid, my parents were like, we're going to see your aunt, and they took off. And I was like, at home, the babysitter who definitely wasn't paying attention to me or my sister, so I turned HBO on, and sure enough, oh look, a cartoon's on. I gotta check this out. And the first thing I see is the Lochnar come and melt this guy, and I'm just like, what is this thing? It's like the scariest thing, but I couldn't stop watching that.
Showtime, in particular, used to have a segment called After Hours, where they would only show certain movies past 10 o'clock at night, and they were usually very risque, whether they were sexy, whether they were gory. I can't tell you how many movies I saw personally watching that channel. I remember watching Gates of Hell. They would only show that past midnight, and it was the most disgusting thing I'd ever seen. I couldn't believe that I was watching. Of course, flash forward years later, people love the movie. It's Lucio Fulci. Like, he has a whole arsenal of movies that are cult films, including Zombie and The Beyond and whatever.
I think I was like 13 or 14
growing up in Japan, and Lucio Fulci's Zombie was actually on TV late at night. You know, I mean, granted, it was late at night, like 2 a.m. or something, but I recorded it. And of course that, you know, naked girl sequence with the shark is there, not edited. I mean, you know, a 13-year-old boy, I mean, you know, I was like, wow, what is this shit? You know, I got really excited. And I think that really turned me on to, you know, cult cinemas.
The first time I saw Hollywood Chainsaw Hookers was because I taped it one night on Cinemax, just in this roulette. So like late 80s, early 90s, there was just this glorious time period of some fantastic films being played on cable. And then there was also, on Saturday nights, there was a show called Up All Night. And they would play like all those Scream Queen movies, you know, like that was one of the first times I saw Sorority Babes, Slime Bull, Bolorama, Vampire on Bikini Beach.
A touching story of buxom young girls and buffed young dudes who take valuable time from their busy summer of surfing, dental floss bathing suits, and pounding each other to pound some steaks into those creatures of the night.
Rhonda Shear would just play all these Scream Queen movies, and then when you turn the channel over to Joe Bob Briggs on the movie channel, he would be playing like all the Andy Sedaris movies. And Joe Bob Briggs was like my film school. I learned everything about Andy Sedaris through Joe Bob Briggs because he would count down the body count, naked breasts, you know, like explosions, how many exploding helicopters. And he like schooled me on Andy Sedaris every night. And to this day, like Hard Ticket to Hawaii is like one of the greatest films, you know?
This ain't no hula. It's a hard ticket to Hawaii. Rated R.
You were exposed to a lot of things that otherwise you wouldn't have been. So there's this discovery aspect with that that's like can be really intoxicating and exciting, and it can expand your horizons in a way that's a little more difficult now because there's so much choice that you tend to have this like paralyzation of what you're going to watch. But you know, Saturday night I would turn on Joe Bob Briggs on Monster Vision and discover all these like just wild, insane films that I never would have sat down and watched otherwise.
What we've got here is 9 dead bodies, 15 zombies, 2 breasts, which Ted, of course, made us edit out for TNT, so you won't see those. The second week of Joe Bob's summer school session for remedial Monster Vision watchers, we enter the wonderful world of animals with the Beastmaster trilogy, all 3 Beastmaster movies, and this is only the 279th time they've been seen on TNT. We got them racked up? All right. We have 57 dead bodies, 1 kidnapping, 4 motor vehicle chases, 1 wheelchair chase, 1 white slavery ring. No, wait a minute. Yellow slavery ring. 1 machine gun massacre. 1 machete battle. Multiple blue finger flame. 1 zombified levitating 2,000-year-old man with really bad fingernails. Exploding building, exploding temple, knife to the forehead. 1 ocean of chained skeletons. 1 palace of golden Buddhas. Poison gas, 9 kung fu scenes, and good ones they are. 4 stars.
There have always been 2 kinds of late-night movie hosts. There's the kind that make fun of the film, and there's the kind that celebrate the film. You know, I was determined to be the kind that celebrates the film. So, so we did a lot of research. It was pre-internet, but we tried to find out as much as we could about who made the film. It was not easy. Who made the film? Where did it come from? Why did they make it? How much did it cost? All that kind of stuff.
We have it for you, intact, uncut, unedited, in all its disgusting Technicolor glory.
You know, at the time, I was just trying to bring a lot of this stuff out of obscurity. That when I first started reviewing the films, they were considered trash, and you know, beneath even the contempt of my own networks, which would just throw them on my show because they didn't know what to do with them.
Right now, we are about to watch one of the greatest Emmanuel movies ever made. Of course, that's like saying the best Mexican wine, I know, but it's also real late on a cold night, and you have nothing better to do than watch the movie channel, so listen up to this. No dead bodies, 51 naked breasts, and a stripper who does a trick with a ping pong ball you will not believe.
The cult classic, the cult film, the cult hit, the cult blockbuster And the reality is yeah, a lot of the movies from especially the 70s and 80s, the stuff that came out on VHS and in grindhouse theaters and HBO cable at the time, a lot of people grew up on that, had fond memories of it, and they talked about it with their friends. They found other people that liked it, and before you know it, you have groups of people that like a lot of these films, and they are classified as cult films.
I don't see why being open-minded about film means stopping when it gets to trash. And Pauline Kael, that quote, people say it over and over again. Pauline Kael said, to appreciate great art, you have to appreciate great trash.
I mean, that was a byproduct of just commercial necessity. All these cable channels figured out they've got to have constant new content. And so they bought cheap content and they threw it on my shows, and that's how it ended up being a celebration of cult movies.
I still can't believe it. I can't believe we're breaking for commercial in the middle of the most amazing kung fu sequence ever filmed.
Eating pate is just part of the curriculum at the Princess Academy. And at 11:30, it's Tuesday Horror. Tonight, it's The Looking Glass from Hell and Mirror Mirror. Catch a different horror flick every Tuesday night in January. It's all here. Cinemax, if you like movies.
Hey, no problem. Mr. Brian Bosworth requests
Ernest P. Worrell in a brand new movie. Director of Kickboxers for a sexy and outrageous comedy.
Coming out of the 60s and going into the 70s, you had, issues of race and social status and sexuality and feminism that were all, influencing these filmmakers and influencing these films. And when you get to the 90s, there was kind of this weird time where we all kind of were like, I think we got it together. Communism fell and the economy was starting to was coming back from the early 90s recession, and everything seemed good. And I think there's a lot in common between punk rock and cult film. There's a lot in common between those two things, where the angstier the time, the better it is.
90s, let me just think back to the 90s. Holy crap, what movies did I do in the 90s? I did. Oh yeah.
It was truly love at first sight.
This is hell now, right?
No, the tin foil keeps the heat out.
The 90s felt like an extension of the 80s with a little bit of politics thrown in, for the most part. It felt to me, the 80s were the era, of course, of the blockbuster, the first major decade, the full decade, numerically, where big blockbuster pictures and tentpole pictures were the norm. 90s came around, it was the same, except they sort of disguised it and peppered it with a little politics.
There are some nuggets in the 90s that, at Scream Factory, I've seen some of them come to life already from some of our releases. If somebody had told me in the 90s that Tales from the Crypt, Demon Knight, and Bordello of Blood, and Death Becomes Her would now be cult films, I never would have believed them, but they were very well received when we put them out on Blu-ray. But definitely Showgirls came from that time period, and that was right smack in the middle of the 90s, and that's arguably one of the biggest cult films I think ever made.
Brought about some new and exciting filmmakers, came to the forefront. Guys who had started in the 80s on primarily on music videos when they were sort of birthed, had come to fruition and had, gotten large, like David Fincher and guys like that.
You remember in high school, you'd hear of this guy Tarantino, and he came out, and you were like, oh, well, he's really into this, French New Wave films, and you're like, oh, well, what's that? And you kind of followed this stream up, trying to track down, just trying to track down the influences,
His kind of lack of complete any type of film style just
wanting to make movies for love of it. Godard is the one who taught me the fun and the freedom and the joy of breaking rules. You know, setting up a close-up on the back of somebody's head as opposed to, you know, and just fucking around with the entire medium.
Quentin Tarantino is kind of like a gateway drug into cult cinema for some people. I feel like that's been a really good thing about him.
He's making cult film pastiche, sort of, you know what I mean? But he also makes films that inspire their own cult audiences. I think that they're different because they are mainstream in a way, because he has broken through to the mainstream, but I think he still is very much making cult movies just with Hollywood budgets.
To me, the 90s was this incredible period. The 90s really was the beginnings of independent film. You know, that was, you know, where Tarantino, you know, cut his teeth. I mean, that's where, you know, Steven Soderbergh became big. Kevin Smith, I mean, come on, like all these filmmakers that because of the advent of video and direct-to-video, you could take a risk on a small movie like Clerks, right? It didn't need to make a mountain of money in the theater because you know, you knew like down the road that movie's gonna make its money on video. That's gonna be a hit on video. I look on the 90s as a goldmine of great work, and also the beginnings of so many filmmakers whose careers, you know, reverberate into today.
80s were so ingrained in VHS culture, and the 90s were sort of there as well, but the 90s had a shift where DVDs sort of took over around, like, I want to say mid-90s, late 90s, DVDs kind of took over.
This is DVD. And this is what happens when you watch DVD. It's a movie on a disc the size of a CD. The picture is twice as sharp as VHS. The sound is infinitely clearer. It looks and sounds like you're at the movies, but you can experience it at home.
For the 90s, there was not a lot of films available on DVD. Up through the 2000s, there were films you couldn't get on DVD, like The Magnificent Ambersons by Orson Welles, not available on DVD till like 2010, which is ridiculous when you think about it because you always felt like everything was available on DVD. I think it ups the game in the level of quality you could see, which is so important for something like Street Trash. Like seeing Street Trash on DVD, I can't imagine. Having seen it for the first time on DVD, I can't imagine having watched it on VHS. And as much as that adds a quality and a dimension that makes you feel like you're almost grittier for watching it, I feel like when you watch it on DVD, the effects get so much more in your face and so much more realistic that it's beautiful.
It's funny how the DVD generation has those specific titles that you'd find and then just show to everybody. I mean, Army of Darkness, Evil Dead, like I was the horror fan of my group of friends back in New York, but they weren't all into it. They wouldn't seek those movies. I was the one that would find it and show it to everybody. And again, I think the coolest thing about those movies is, you know, curating and making it a communal experience.
All right, you primitive screwheads, listen up. This is my boomstick.
You know, like early, you know, Anchor Bay release and Synapse Films, you know, those guys, those pioneers of releasing cult movies to the major market. Yeah, I think they did the great service to the market and really kind of reintroduced lost classics to us.
By the time DVD was becoming the dominant one, they were making less and less and less VHSs, and places like, you know, that were around that were still carrying and still renting were not carrying as many. So the transition was easy. You just showed up one day and there wasn't a VHS of what you were getting. You got a DVD, and by that time, most people had enough time to transition from DVD players and everything else. So it was like a smooth, like maybe between like a 3-year period where pretty much you just blinked and you just all of a sudden realized that VHS was gone, you know, and that was it.
It's just also the first time you got to see movies in their proper aspect ratio. Even though you grew up watching all these VHS tapes, it was all of a sudden like the first time seeing Deep Red in that condition. Seeing, yeah, it was like, it was pretty shocking. You could actually see these movies in the proper way.
Having lived in movie theaters,
and watching the same film over and over again, you remember exactly how it looks. And in movies like Empire Strikes Back and Ghostbusters and stuff like that, they will crop to the most important part of the scene, so your main actors. So things like IG-88 and Winston will get edited out for TV. And I want to see the whole film. I want to see everything that was there. And I think the thing about DVDs that helped is you finally got a more in-depth look at the filmmaking process.
The main innovation that DVD gave that kind of helped breathe new life into cult films is the special feature. Because, you know, I may have loved a film like Return of the Living Dead on VHS, but now at some point a company picks that up, they dig back into the archives, they pull up all this behind the scenes stuff, they're interviewing the directors. Suddenly you could learn more about these films than you ever could from a VHS.
I like the commentary. I like having, it's not the whole have the physical thing, it's like having all the extras, everything that goes with that film. I don't want to just see it, you know, from beginning to credits. I want to, after I watch it, then I want to watch the behind the scenes featurette, and then I want to listen to the commentary, then I want to watch the stills, I want to see the deleted scenes. I mean, that's the way I experience a movie.
But then the DVD business began to sink as the internet took its place.
Now that I've gotten on the internet, I'd rather be on my computer than doing just about anything.
In the late 90s, it was weird. One of my most vivid memories of downloading a video and watching my thing, just like I'm waiting 2 hours to download, someone had made a cam version of the trailer for Star Wars Episode 1, The Phantom Menace. That was one of the most downloaded videos, bootleg videos off the internet. I think I still have a copy of the cam version that everybody downloaded, and it was on mirror sites, and you had to kind of pop it up here and there. That was huge.
I remember it taking forever. I remember those BMW fucking commercials with directed by like John Woo and shit like that. I remember taking like a fucking day to download one of them just to watch it. But that was amazing at the time. You know, it was like, holy shit, I could watch stuff.
I mean, good internet was the key, right? Because like, you had a dial-up modem, but like, what the hell were you gonna do with it? Get on the AOL portal and, you know, get in a chat room or something?
And at that point in the age of the internet, it was merely a tool that you could send email and get some news. I don't think anybody had any idea that you could revive old movies online.
I think when bandwidth changed and just computers in general changed, and now you could stream video easily, not have to wait 30, 40 minutes to watch a 30-second clip. At first, I mean, it was amazing. But when the whole Metallica Napster thing happened, why Hollywood couldn't see, oh wow, as bandwidth increases and internet speeds increase, pretty soon you're going to be able to download a movie in a second too. Shit, we're going to be next. But everyone just kind of ignored it, it felt like. And it's an endless argument because there's many sides to it. Some people say that's good. Like now people are seeing your movie who otherwise might have never even heard of it. And yeah, okay, that is cool, but it is still a business.
As a filmmaker, I cannot give my product away for free because if I don't get a return on my investment, I can't get the investor to invest in my next picture. So much of the internet, not everyone, but many, maybe most people think that everything should be free. They should be able to pirate, they should be able to do whatever they want. Well, if that's the case, then there's going to be no low-budget movies made. There'll only be large-budget stuff that shows on the big screen.
It is an art form, yet it's a commerce. So if we don't make money for our producers and production companies, we don't get to make another one, you know? So it doesn't really matter. You know, like a million people could watch my movie illegally, and I won't get to do another movie.
As a watcher and a fan of the films, I hate it, and as someone who's involved in the business, I hate it because I'm seeing it. So I wish it would go away, but I just don't think it will.
It kills the industry, the fact, until they find a way to really protect the movies. You must pay, let's say, 1 cent to watch a movie, but you must pay. It's good. But if you can see it for free, that kills the movie, you know. No one is getting paid by that.
Making media available for free was the greatest thing that ever happened to the viewer and the worst thing that could ever happen to a filmmaker.
That's bull hunky. File sharing is the best thing in the world for an independent artist or a cult filmmaker. What's the most important thing in one's life? What is the most important thing somebody can give to you as an artist? Their time. That's an hour and a half of their time. You can't pay people to look at most of the shit that's out there.
Honestly, every time we see, you know, our anthologies pop up on the torrent sites, we're kind of excited. You know, it's like, yeah, we know we probably wouldn't have gotten that $7 from iTunes, but odds are if they're BitTorrenting, they wouldn't have bought it anyways. We're kind of like, cool, people are seeing our stuff. And so, yeah, on one hand, it sucks because, you know, you have filmmakers not making money, and these things aren't free, and it's a lot of hard work, and people have to make a living.
Do I think 10,000 people saw my movie and get a little happy about that? I guess I do. You know, it doesn't mean, but I'll tell you one thing, it's pretty damn good reason why I won't make another one though.
If you see a film on BitTorrent, you know, and you like that filmmaker's work and you don't go out and buy more of it or support it in some way, and you just continue to take it, then that you're going to kind of snuff that voice out.
Would that help with internet piracy if they actually enforced the law just a couple times and made a public spectacle out of it? Maybe would it persuade some people? Probably, yeah, but at the same time, like, you don't want to see some 16-year-old get fined that much money and get put in jail. Like, I mean, I don't want to see it come to that, but at the same time, it's been the bane of my existence and a lot of filmmakers on the indie level.
That's a tough one. I don't know. You can't stop people from torrenting, and if you go online and try to argue with them, you're just gonna get the shit kicked out of you, and you're gonna look like the bad guy.
I think the worst thing you can do is go after the people that actually are doing that. Like, I've heard a lot of people just say, like, if you do this, fuck you, and it's honestly, it's one of these things, like, it's certainly a problem, and I do think like, no one who makes a movie is psyched when it gets pirated. However, I think it needs to, like, fall on, you know, people or corporations like Google and these other things that actually make that accessible. Where it's like, if there wasn't a cheap alternative and suddenly they didn't have that window where they can just, you know, get any movie they want for free, then it would be a much different story.
You also have to remember there's also a generation of people now that are growing up that they don't know any better. I mean, that's how that's how things have changed now with getting your media, whether it's through your apps on your phone, or, you know, through your iPad, or through VOD or Redbox or Netflix or YouTube or whatever. There's so many ways to get media, and a lot of it you can get free too. And so some people don't know the distinction of somebody that's put something up illegally or legitimately, and, you know, it gets very cloudy.
Much in the same way that bringing VHS into people's homes was like a democratizing thing for cult films, I think that the internet, and in particular, you know, torrenting, for better or worse, has had that same effect. And if anything, it's massively magnified, right? The technology that can bring a cult film into your house at the, like snap of your fingers is a really great thing. I think that it was a bigger problem maybe 10 years ago because now a lot of streaming services have caught up. And frankly, I think people are very willing to pay $10 a month to Netflix or Shudder or Amazon to be able to stream these things.
Streaming is great. Downloading was bad. Downloading, when we only had downloading, we didn't have streaming, that could have destroyed the independent film business because once you downloaded it, then it was disseminated for no money everywhere, and there was no way to collect.
I remember when like Netflix and Hulu were first kind of getting big. Netflix, like streaming wise, not TV, like they would have a ton of cult movies and stuff, which they now all got rid of. But that was kind of a cool way too, because it's just like all these random movies that you never would have heard of before, and then they're just there in your face. You're like, okay, I can watch this if I want to.
Once streaming happened, so that, I mean, it's much easier to stream something for $1.99 than to BitTorrent it, or whatever they're calling it now, which might take all day, And so they got the price to a point where, for convenience, people will go ahead and pay for the stream,
Look at Netflix originals, right? So now Netflix is making originals, Hulu's making originals. They're not putting out physical copies of that. So what happens when the day comes that they take it out of rotation? Is it just gone forever? And so the argument of, well, by having file sharing and people can still see these things, I think that the industry needs to figure that out.
Now, if there's no way that it's commercially available, I'll watch a movie. I don't BitTorrent it, but I'll watch a movie that's only available in that form. If it's available legally, I buy the movie, whether it's available on a pay streaming service like Vudu or iTunes or whatever. I'll buy it. But if it's not available in any other form, it's the only way I can watch the movie guilt-free. Otherwise, I don't watch bootleg.
If there is no way to see it, okay, I accept piracy, because it's stupid not to let people see a movie.
There's certainly stuff that no one is ever going to put out again.
See the acme of magical achievement. See Alabama's Ghost, starring Christopher Brooks, in color rated PG.
Where it's just totally lost its appeal, or the rights are just such a nightmare that you're not able to find it. And so, I think that stuff you should be able to buy it through some channel. Fright Night Part 2 is a really good example of that, where it's I've seen a ton of bootlegs.
Well, you see it on YouTube even. There'll be illegal, full-length movies that are up on YouTube, and I'm often surprised. And when I look at the views of those, and it says something like 80,000, and it's a film that either I've put out through Scream Factory or other companies have put out independents, I'm thinking to myself, how come that didn't get shut down? Why is it still up there? Because, yeah, it does harm sales of the actual film. However, as you said, the double-edged sword is that it's also a place where if a lot of people seeing it, talking about it, they're writing comments in the thread, which is basically a cult film forum on one film. It's also adding to the reputation of the film overall over time because more people are seeing it.
I'm pretty sure someone has uploaded Vasectomy the movie to YouTube. I haven't looked, but I'm fairly certain that Vasectomy the movie with Paul Sorvino and Abe Vigoda is somewhere to be found on the internet.
It's the Italians! It's always been the Italians! It started way back with Plato. He was a Greek. That's the difference. He drank wine and ate macaroni, didn't he?
Can't argue that point.
And I do know that the VHS cult people who collect this stuff, they're really trying to preserve it. So a lot of those videos are actually being uploaded to YouTube.
Who knew that the movies would find a, I guess now a 6th or 7th home, with that sort of stuff, you know.
Well, in some cases, I think that the fandoms, and specifically online fandoms, because I think that's really what drives all of it, in some cases has literally resurrected these films and brought them back to life in a case where without it, they may have just died off in obscurity.
There are groups and websites devoted to almost every movie, but definitely in the cult films, and I'm a part of them. I've seen them. People post pictures, rare stills and clips and inside stories, and oh, I used to work on this film and all that stuff. That's great, because then people can find homes of the movies that they like and participate and share with other people, like, I loved this movie too.
But again, that's the beauty of taking our love to this new level via social media and being able to talk to people all over the world. That's the benefit of it. Like, I think that's just as special as inviting 4 or 5 friends over to watch a cult movie. The fact that we could talk to people from different parts of the world and have that connection is amazing.
You do end up finding out about more stuff, but the problem is, like, you don't really have a true voice sort of curating everything, and what ends up happening is everything sort of like falls into a slush pile, you know, because it's like we're constantly just being bombarded with movies that, like, some of them are just flat out terrible, you know, where people are like trying to turn them into something like, I shouldn't do this, but I'll totally call this movie out because I think it's not good. But like Hide and Go Shriek, you know, I remember seeing that, and I saw the cover, I was like, this movie looks awesome. And I watched it and I was not thrilled with it, you know, and then I remember seeing other people be like, oh my God, Hide and Go Shriek is amazing. It's like, it isn't though.
You know, if you want to watch a cult movie, you can look up best cult movies of the 80s, and there's 500 lists you can read and just start ticking them off. And it takes the joy out of it for me in some ways. It takes that excitement of, you know, getting a VHS and going home with it to watch it, because you don't know what you're about to see. Whereas with the internet, you say, oh, somebody said, this was good, I'm gonna go find it on YouTube.
It's not the same experience you could get going and talking to the guy behind the video counter and saying like, hey, I love Enzo Castellari's High Crime. What are some other Polizio movies that you can recommend? Instead, you know, if you go and look at your Netflix or what have you and see the stuff that's recommended to you, it's like the type of thing that if one of your friends if you told them you liked Halloween and they recommended this other movie to you, like, you'd probably stop being friends with them.
If there was a film called Human Centipede when we were 14, we would have been all over that. But everybody else would have ignored it. But with the internet, with social media, with late night talk show hosts all tuned into the weird stuff that's happening, things like that become mainstream. But Human Centipede or, I don't know, Turbo Kid, stuff like that, it would never have reached mainstream audiences. And it would have been, not to sound arrogant, but it would have been ours.
It's a bit of a give and take, because yeah, it's less special. You're not walking into a musty, interesting building populated by, you know, the kind of people that, you know, you really hope you're cool enough to hang out with. And trying to make connections with people and bond over movies and stuff like that. Yeah, that's missing. There's an online version of that. It's not as familiar to me.
I think ultimately what the internet has done is it's just made it easier for you to find that person that you've shared that experience with. And I think that's kind of the beautiful thing about cult films in general, which is that has always been beautiful about cult films, which is, again, that when you talk to somebody that you've seen the same film that very few other people have seen, you go, oh my God, I've had an experience, you know. And what it's done for me is that, like, my personal experience with being a cult movie fan and my interactions on the internet is that it's just kind of made me realize that cult's much bigger.
Now we're in an interesting time where we have access to almost everything. Everybody is acquiring and putting out every cult movie you could think of on Blu-ray. So not only are we able to find these things, but we're able to see them better than when they probably played in theaters.
A lot of people today aren't going to know how it's like all the Jodorowsky movies weren't available really in the 90s. You had to find them in other areas, you know. I found a video store called a video store named Desire, and I went in and asked him for Jodorowsky movies, and he had these dubs of them, dubs from Japanese laser discs. And then I dubbed it, and so now I had like this 5th generation movie, you know. And now it's just pretty much mind-boggling that now these things are on Blu-ray.
You know, I won't lie and say that I've, you know, everything that I've seen through, you know, on the up and up. But there also is a huge proliferation of repertory companies now that are bringing stuff that was hard to find. So, you know, some people's delivery method, they would prefer to, like, you know, have it on a file, and maybe that's the way you get it on a file. For me, I would prefer to, there's a vendor two things down from where we're at right now, who I'm going to spend a lot of money at, of stuff that I could get for free, you know, with a click of a mouse. But, you know, they love it. They went and got it. They made it look better. And I'm going to support them.
And that's what people want it to be right now, especially in physical media, collector medias, because this, you know, they want to have something to hold and cherish, and they don't want it to be reliant to be on a file or, you know, a computer screen or at the mercy of will Netflix carry it this month or not. You know, they want something in their hand. They want it to look as good as possible.
And I think we're all getting rewarded in the long run because we're seeing these movies. I always like the picture like, wow, I'm seeing, you know, Fulci's Don't Torture a Duckling, the way it looked through the eyes of people in the theater in the 70s. It had to look this clean.
I would like it to be as pristine and perfect as I tried to make it.
We have these boutique companies. We have like Scream Factory, Shout Factory, Vinegar Syndrome, all these awesome companies that are bringing these out. Hopefully they'll get around to a lot of these ones that really deserve that kind of treatment.
It's not even about cult movies anymore, but now we have cult labels. There's literally specific labels that will put out a group of movies, and you kind of get a sense of what kind of movies that label will put out, you know? So for example, Arrow, which is a UK company now doing a lot of stuff here in America, will do stuff like, you know, The Hills Have Eyes Special Edition, along with the Hellraiser collection, which came out not too long ago. Kino Lorber is great because they'll put out something like Highway to Hell, like some cult movie. And then at the same time, where are they? They're hidden there. They'll do the effects movies, for example. Rolling Thunder from Shout Factory, one of the best cult movies of all time. Then you have people like Severin. Severin will do everything from Richard Stanley's kind of masterpiece, if you will, to, you know, WTF cinema like Burial Ground, which you must see to believe. Blue Underground is another great company, headed up by Bill Lustig, the director of Maniac Cop and Maniac. And he's put out stuff like these Bronx Warriors collections, which is ridiculous. Bless him for doing that. I love Synapse. They are a great company, and for some reason, the collector in us will get these steelbooks. So you can own Demons 1 and 2, Steelbook Edition. Yeah, now Vestron Video is getting in on the game, so there's things like Parents coming out.
You want to like be the person to like find like the next, you know, Roar or Mutilator or Blood Rage or whatever, where you can really like put that out, and then suddenly it can be this like new sort of cult experience. The Visitor is a great example of that, where, you know, that had been under the radar for such a long time, and then Draft House put it out, and everyone's like, holy shit, Sam Peckinpah and John Huston and Franco Nero are in this like weird sort of like Omen, Jesus, Exorcist ripoff.
I'm not like David Lynch. I mean, I don't know if you've ever seen the David Lynch interview.
It's just the most sickening, horrifying joke. And this world is so troubled. And It's such a sadness that you think you've seen a film on your fucking telephone. Get real.
On your fucking phone, you know, and he's like really upset about it. But so I don't feel that way. I do feel like people who have never seen a 35 millimeter print sometimes lose an experience that they could have.
Yeah, I mean that's the thing, is if you could get to see some of these films with an audience at a revival screening, there's something magical about it. And I mean that's how I discover a lot of stuff. The New Beverly here in Los Angeles, I think it's like Tuesday nights is their Grindhouse night, and sometimes they'll show you movies that you cannot get in any other way, shape, or form. They're not on DVD, or the VHSs are long gone, but they're showing 35 millimeter or 16 millimeter prints of it. And there's something special about seeing cult movies that way. So there's still ways to, even, you know, not every movie will always be available. Like, so even though there's this glut of companies putting out cult movies, there's always gems and things to be discovered.
If you have a local theater that shows, you know, grindhouse movies or exploitation, or cult movies or little known movies where you have the chance to just go in and see something blind, you absolutely should support that and take advantage of that, because there's nothing more thrilling than sitting in a darkened theater, not knowing what you're going to get, and then all of a sudden you're just blindsided by some insanity that you had no idea was going to come at you.
I like to go to the theater because sitting at home watching movies is great. You know, I love hanging out with Adrian. We watch movies and it's great. We just kick it on the couch and it's comfortable. But there's something about the theater experience that when you go, it's not just the big screen. It's the crowd reactions. It's the people around you. You know, if it's a scary movie or it's an action movie or it's something crazy and people are yelling and screaming, it just adds to the experience of a film, in my opinion. And that's something I don't think will, you know, go away.
It comes back to it being a people industry. It has to be, you know, you have to get up and go out. It has to be a cultural event, and you can't download that. You can binge watch certain things, but even then, that's not even by design. The internet is designed to give you access to something, but unlike a theater or a place like this, it can't control how that access is presented to you.
I think maybe you could make room for both things in your life. You know, it's not always one thing or another thing. It doesn't have to be. I do try to make the home environment as close to like a theater as you can, but it's still not the same as seeing with people.
It is that communal, sacred, here's our church kind of feeling. But all those movies that I rented on VHS, I didn't watch it with an audience. I watched it by myself, you know? Usually by myself, because the only way I could get privacy in my house was to watch a movie. I could say to my parents, I rented a movie, and they'd be like, all right, don't bother Jack, he's watching a movie. So, I mean, who cares if it's spooling in a VHS player or if it's streaming online?
I would say this age that we live in, with regard to the speed at which you can see, view, experience content this fast on your smartphone, has very little effect on long-term cult pictures. Because those people that want to view things quickly will, A, not want to spend the time to do such things, to look at. After all, cult films are history. It takes effort to study history. You have to want it.
So the discovery isn't there, and that's a bummer. But all that takes really is a little bit of self-discipline, right? That's on you, the viewer. You know, the paralyzation of choice isn't the choice's fault, it's your fault, and it's my fault. I fall victim to it too. You just have to be able to sit yourself down and have the attention span and dedication to just watch a thing that you're unfamiliar with, you know? So I think that it's a whole new world, but it's a positive one.
Yeah, I don't know if we're gonna run out of cult movies to continually discover, but the way it's evolved is interesting. Is that the word? Here's why, because now we're at a point where people are making or going out of their way to make cult films. And honestly, I can't stand that. I really, the newer films that you know, put in that filter to make it look like it's a grindhouse movie, or where they're like, I went for Ed Wood bad. It's like, doesn't work for me at all.
You know, it seems like more and more what's happening is people are kind of going into the past for cult movies. And I think the future of it is going to come from movies like what Neil Breen is doing now, where it's, you know, stuff like Fateful Findings, where it's done in this very genuine way, but ends up just sort of missing the mark and then having this weird back-end entertainment value and becoming something completely different. I felt like a lot of the recent sort of cult stuff where they take that approach of just trying to make a cult movie just doesn't hit it. You know, it's like they're just hitting the wrong beats or going after the wrong things.
If you take a movie like Sharknado, and if that movie, you know, I could see that if Sharknado was not blasted on Sci-Fi Channel and it was just this little release movie that came out in the 80s, you know, people would talk about it. But when it kind of, you know, kind of the light of wide-stream distribution kind of burns away all of you know, the specialness that it had.
There's more, and they're more accessible, and people are also cashing in on it because, you know, they think that you can reproduce a cult film. They think you can retro-engineer that formula. So, you know, anybody with a camera and a bottle of ketchup and a fake axe thinks that they can go out and do a slasher movie, thinks they can do a horror movie, and therefore, you know, you do get some gems out of that, but you end up with more junk.
Whenever they're trying to make a cult movie, it never works. It's always from, you know, The Apple being a great example. It's like they're trying to make Grease or something like that. And then what that turns into is something very different, but it's still very entertaining. And you can tell because they had their hearts in it and, you know, wanted to make something cool, or even if they were just, you know, blasting cocaine the whole way through, it's still a pretty unique experience.
The Apple is success.
There ain't no pride, there ain't no shame, there ain't no sympathy, there ain't no blame, there ain't no pleasure, there ain't
The Apple brings you everything.
Didn't matter how silly the movie was or whatever, you know, they were going to put their all into it, and that stands out, I think, to people like Ty West, who now make these great films. It's because he recognized the craft in these movies with silly premises. Whereas again, it's like people nowadays have a digital camera and think, well, it doesn't matter, it's supposed to be bad. So who cares if it doesn't work 100%? We're going for bad.
A movie like Samurai Cop, because it was made by a foreign director who came to the United States to make an American action movie. So through his eyes, you get his take on an American action movie, and it's just bizarre. It just doesn't work. And I guess the same thing would go for Birdemic. And the same thing would go for a movie called Super Fights. It's just this guy from Hong Kong who came here to make a movie about American wrestling and this kid that joins it. But instead, you just get this outrageous batshit film. And if it wasn't through that lens of a foreigner trying to make an American action film, you wouldn't have it.
Can I say that Pieces is a great movie? Yes, it is. It is a great movie.
Pieces. It's exactly what you think it is.
Any other director that made that movie, sometimes it's like the stars align. If anybody else tried to make that movie, it wouldn't work. But because that was made in the early 80s by that director, it's like, it's magic. It can never be reproduced.
10 people can make a cult film. They can go out to say that they're going to make a cult film. It doesn't mean that their movies are going to become cult films. The fans decide that. The fans ultimately decide that. I mean, marketing can position a movie into trying to make a cult with their posters or advertising their trailers. The filmmakers can try and scratch it up and make it look grindhouse or old school or black and white or do whatever they want. But it's ultimately the final jury is the fans.
So that's how I feel about the new generation. Step up your game. Try to make good movies, because then in 10 years, your sincerity will show off.
The fact that anyone can make a movie is wonderful. Anyone can make a painting. Anyone can write a book. Now, anyone can make a movie. Everybody wanted to write the great American novel when I was young, right? Now everyone kind of wants to make the great American movie, and that's wonderful if they can do that.
You know, a lot of it is just, it's like if you get kind of good early word of mouth and like the right people see it and respond to it, and if you make something that's halfway decent, you know, you can get that kind of following. Like another good example of that is The Love Witch, which, you know, it's a super specific thing where it's like, here's this like 60s era drama, you know, kind of filtered through some, you know, technicolor weirdness, but it's super unique and people latched onto it and really dug it.
Blue Ruin, I watched that and I didn't know anything about it. And I'm like, my God, that was so simple. What was the budget on it? Oh, that was awesome. And that goes to good storytelling.
We are blessed by the fact you can make movies for $5,000.
It's all about, to me, just looking forward and what we can do moving forward. And aside from just having the conversation, I think that that's what makes, to me, some people like the Saska sisters so great, because here are two, you know, amazing, intelligent women who not only have an appreciation for those older films, but are making modern cult cinema in a lot of ways. You look at a film like American Mary, and that's a film dealing with sex and violence from a very uniquely feminine perspective. So to me, I think the best thing we can do is encourage more viewpoints like that to come and work in the medium.
The Babadook, It Follows, the television show Stranger Things. Those are all movies that have a little bit of an ode and a nod to some stuff that's been done in the past, but they executed it well, and they executed it well enough where enough people saw that and respected it and said, oh, okay. And those, I think, would be what I would call future cult properties.
You wouldn't have said 5 years ago that a Netflix miniseries would influence the culture. And so you can't say that some horror filmmaker that starts production tomorrow won't influence the culture with his vision.
The movie finds the people. People don't find the movie. It's like when a certain movie comes out and the word of mouth starts, oh yeah, I have to go see that. And someone else says, yeah, you should go see that. Well, I never heard of it. Well, go try it. And I think the movie that makes people say that can become the cult movie.
One thing that Rupert Murdoch doesn't have, word of mouth. If you make something good, people will say good, no matter how much money Rupert Murdoch has or Summer Meyerson has, they cannot buy word of mouth, right? They can't. They can spend $200 million to promote Harley Gin or whatever the thing is, Suicide Squad, but they can't create good word of mouth. It's impossible. They can't do it.
As far as like what the permanent future of it is, it's just impossible to predict. Like, you know, back in 2005, no one would have predicted that The Room would have become what it did, where it's this like, you know, cult monster.
Experience this quirky new black comedy.
You have my money, right?
I treat you like a princess, and you stab me in the back. It's a riot. You are tearing me apart, Lisa!
I think those movies typically reveal themselves over the decades, and, you know, the further we get away from them in time and seeing what sticks and what doesn't.
So I think it's a wonderful age. This age that's coming up probably going to be terrific. There'll be you're just going to have to, you as the lover of movies are going to have to go and find them, and there are plenty of people who will direct you to them.
You know, whether it's a fan film that's come out or some short video that a kid made, sharing of videos, sharing of new filmmakers' visions is so easy now, and you can talk to anybody. So that aspect alone has completely changed the landscape. I mean, it really has democratized indie filmmaking. I don't think we've even seen, like, we haven't even gotten to the limits of what's possible yet with handheld devices and social media. Hollywood should be scared shitless.
But I always have this problem. I always watch garbage anyway. I mean, I just would rather go, then I end up, you know, when I know I should be watching a Manchester at Sea, I end up watching Suburban Sasquatch instead.
One, this was good for a chick. I'm not doing that. And he goes, yep, that's pretty good.
I thought movies were dumb because they weren't real. And how did I know that movies weren't real? It's because no one went to the bathroom in the movies.
All right, BJ, one, marker. All right. That's how it's done. Oh yeah, slates. Oh wait, the headphones are over here. It's not how it's done.
Dorothy in The Wizard of Oz, along with her friends on the Yellow Brick Road, never went to make some yellow. They never went to go to the bathroom.
Heart, blood, sweat, semen. Sometimes that's not yours, but hey, that's filmmaking.
Favorite 80s action film?
Does it have to be a cold movie? Predator.
Favorite 90s action?
Predator 2. No.
When do they go to the bathroom is the question I always asked my parents. When do they go to the bathroom? This movie is bullshit.
Yeah, I take that back. I think Twilight is a cult film.
That's the first episode of the trailer. That's the first line of the trailer.
I stand by that.
Twilight's a cult film.
I hate it, but...
Titty movie. Name a titty, your favorite titty. Favorite titty movie.
Stripes.
Oh yeah.
This is the normal ice cream man. There's another dude who does this neighborhood, and it's all he has is a sonar. It's this creepy truck, and it just does this like, and then you see kids all coming out of their houses like zombies, like.
And this is the record store clerk coming out, too. Whatever this is, this need to define things. You just need to categorize things. So you know what section of the store to go find it. That's all it is. And it's all left over from that time where we needed to be like, now would that be in comedy, would that be in music? You know? It's that. It's all that leftover. And when I say record store clerk, I do mean asshole.
Ask anybody in charge of the accounting of that thing, it didn't really make money. But can you make another one? Why do you want to make another one? I thought it didn't really make any money. Yeah, you know, but you love it. You know, the fans love it. And they're really fun to make. Yeah, really fun to make. Like, this is where you cut to a shot of all the ulcers in my stomach.
So my father, at the age of 5 years old, takes me to see 2001: A Space Odyssey. And what happens in that film? They go to the bathroom. Dr. Flynn goes into that room, right? And there's the instructions of him going to the bathroom, and it scared